We are live. Welcome to Getting Real. I am your host, Monick Halm. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about a type of real estate investing that I'm doing that I love, but that a lot of people aren't that familiar with. So we're going to talk about the wild, wonderful world of commercial real estate, in particular, triple net, and I'll describe in a little bit what that means. And I think this episode, whether you are new to commercial real estate or you're looking to expand your portfolio, understanding this triple net lease and could be a game changer for you. So we're going to talk about that today. If you have any questions, definitely put it in the chat and we'll try to make sure we answer them. So first, what is commercial real estate? How do we define it? So commercial real estate is essentially any property that is used for business purposes. So it could be office building, could be retail, industrial, multifamily. So basically anything larger than 5 or more units is considered commercial real estate. And when we talk about commercial versus residential, um, this is the difference. So residential real estate is 1 to 4 units. It's considered residential. So you could have a multifamily, a 4 unit, a fourplex, a quad, but that's considered residential. And on the residential side, essentially that means that most of you are probably pretty familiar with how things run on the residential side if you've ever bought a property. So the main differences are what the lenders are looking at and how the property is valued. So in a residential side, the lenders are looking at the borrower. All right, so you as the borrower, they're going to look at your income, your income, your debts, your debt to income ratio. They're gonna look at your credit, how much money you have. So they're looking at you as the credit risk, right? So they're assessing you as the and the risk of you as the debtor. And also on the so that's as opposed to the on the commercial side, they're really looking at it as if you're buying a business, which essentially you are, even though a 4 unit is a business. But on the commercial side, they are really focused on the income of the property. So they're looking at whether how the income of the property can support the the debt. So there's a debt service coverage ratio number that they look at. And so that is the main difference in terms of the lending side. They do look a little bit at the humans underneath it. So it can be an entity that is a borrower, but they're going to require a certain amount of liquidity and net worth, and so there are some aspects of that, but for the most part, the main determinant is the the property itself and its income, right? How the property, what its income will be, and if that the property's income can support the loan. 1 to 4 unit, they're looking if you as a borrower, your income can support the loan. The other way in which they're different is in terms of how you value that property. So with a 1 to 4 unit, you're looking at comps. And so let's say you're buying a 3 unit and that 3 unit is empty, right? So it's not making any money. There is another 3 unit half a block away that's just been sold. That unit is fully rented out with very high rents. There's another 3 unit 2 blocks away that was recently sold. That unit, that three unit is making really low rents, they're not going to factor in the income of the properties for determining whether or not you can rent it out. They're going to look at what they were sold for and the value, and it doesn't matter. So if one was sold for 300,000, another one that's very similar was sold for 310, and they're looking, you're under contract for 295, you should be fine. Like they're just looking at the comps. With commercial, it's not based off of the comps. It's really, again, they're looking at the income of that property, and the value is a product of the net operating income, how much money that particular property makes after taxes, after expenses, but before any loan, but just for its main expenses, or the net operating income, and the cap rate. So last week we talked about cap rates. Last time we talked about how that's basically it's the market rate of return on the property. So it's a factor of those things. So commercial and residential are very different animals in terms of how they're treated with valuations, and also with and with the loans. So that just to get that basic down. Now, when I'm talking about commercial today, and so you can have a 4-unit that's considered residential, 5-unit that's considered commercial, super different. Right now, today, I'm not going to talk so much about the residential side of real estate, and with commercial, I'm not going to talk about apartment buildings and multifamily. Our focus today is on triple net leases. Triple net. And the types of properties where you're going to have those types of tenants: office spaces, retail, industrial. Okay. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And let's talk about triple net leases. Triple net leases are awesome from a landlord's point of view, I think. So what is a triple net lease? When when you have a regular lease, most people are familiar with a regular residential lease. If you've ever been rented an apartment or a house, then you've had that type of lease. You pay the rent. You pay the rent. Sometimes you'll pay some utilities, but you pay the rent. As a landlord, you'll receive the rent, but as landlords of a residential property, or even as a big apartment building, but with it's used for residential purposes, we pay the property taxes, we pay for maintenance, we pay for insurance, we pay all those other expenses. All right, we receive rent, we pay all those other expenses. In a triple net situation, the tenant pays you rent, plus they pay all the property taxes, all the insurance, and all the maintenance. So if there's a problem with the toilets, they fix the toilets. If there's a problem with the roof, they fix the roof. It's really nice. So how does that benefit us as landlords? Well, first of all, also, triple net leases tend to be very long term. Even though you might have, it's common for a 1-year lease on the residential side. For commercial purposes, you're looking at much longer terms. We've been buying these industrial properties, sale leaseback. I will talk about what that means in a little bit. But when we have a tenant come in, and when we're setting up the lease for our tenants, it's usually a 20-year lease, 15 to 20 years. So it's very, very long term. And we have built-in rent increases. So at 2% to 2.5% per year rent increases. So you know exactly what your income is going to be over the long haul. Right? It's very, very steady. You also know what your expenses are going to be, because you put on a fixed rate loan, some debt, and your debt service will stay the same over the term of that loan. So your debt service is here, but your income is here. So as time goes on, you're having more and more profit. And all those other expenses, the property tax, insurance, maintenance, those are on the tenant side. So it really reduces the risk. One of the biggest challenges for a lot of commercial investors, especially on the apartment side, these past few years, is that insurance costs have gone through the roof. Insurance costs are going through the roof. Sometimes it's 300% what it was. And that can really kill your profits and your budget, right? The nice thing about triple net is if insurance goes through the roof, that's on the tenant. Right? All those inflationary price pressures is on the tenant side, not on your side. So that's a really big value. The long-term nature of these triple net leases are a big value that provides a lot more stability. And the type of tenant provides a lot of stability because it's not, just some person who could lose their job. It's a business that's your tenant, generally. Business run by people, but it's a business. When we're doing these triple net leases, we do most of our due diligence on the health and strength of the business. So we look at that business and how it seems to be working. I think most of our businesses have been around, or our tenants, they've been in business for decades. They're usually 8, 9, sometimes 10-figure businesses. So they're very strong businesses that have been around for a long time, but we can see how well they're doing. You can look at their balance sheet, you can look at their profit and loss, you can assess how stable are they as businesses, and then if they're a very good risk, then you can put them in. Now, sometimes you might have a space and you might rent it to a relatively new business. So that's a risk because they could go out of business, but you can just factor that in when you're deciding who to rent to. You're going to look at that tenant, but a business tenant tends to be a lot more stable and secure than an individual tenant. Also, when you're in a place, a lot of the landlord tenant laws that make things if it's very tenant friendly, can be tricky when you're a landlord to be someplace super tenant friendly, like very restrictive rent control or things like that. Those don't usually apply on the commercial side. So those you can raise to market rent. You can, you have that going for you as well. So all of those are benefits on the triple net side for the landlord, which is why I love it. Now on the tenant side, why do they like triple net? So they have more control over the property expenses and maintenance. They don't have to beg us as landlords to fix something for them, or it's on them. They fix it. They're going to make a super big change. They have to have permission, but generally they build it and have it to suit them. And they're able to customize the property exactly for their needs and maintain it the way that works best for them and their business. So that's a benefit for the tenants, and also a lot of the expenses. All these expenses that they're paying for the property are they're deductible expenses for them. So they're the insurance and the maintenance and all of that stuff. So they're deductible expenses for their taxes. Now, if you are interested in doing triple net and you're like, that sounds great, What do I look for that? So here are some key considerations for you as an investor. First off, you want to think about the location. As with any real estate investment, they say, what are the top three rules? One, location; two, location; three, location. Location is very critical. And what might be a great location for a house, right? So you might want a house, that a single family house that you're going to rent out might be deep in a in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, and or it might be up a hill off the beaten path with lots of space and nature, and that might be a great location for a residential property. But on the commercial side, you're generally going to want to be in a high traffic area, that, depending on the type of property, right? So if you are, if it's a retail, it's a little different than if it's an office or if it's industrial. So we do a lot of industrial, and industrial, it doesn't have to be, and normally won't be, right in the middle and center of downtown. It's usually going to be off in an industrial area, but it needs to be close to major transportation hubs, right? So closer to airports, closer to trains, closer to ports, closer to, like, that you want highways, right? The easier for transportation purposes. That's a benefit on the industrial side. If it's retail, right, you're buying a retail establishment, you want it to be maybe on a busy street where people can come, or right in, there's a shopping center. It's just where people are likely to come and see it. If it's an office space, right, also easy to get to, a nice location where people would want to work, right? So think about what type of property it is, what the needs would be for the tenant, and that's the location that you're going to want to look at. You're also going to want to factor in with, location, just what the vacancy rate is for those types of properties in that area. There are certain types of real estate, commercial real estate, that have been hurting, right? So, not all office spaces are working well. They're, especially since COVID, and a lot of people discovered, oh wait, we can work from home. So a lot of office, especially in the downtown core, have been experiencing a lot of vacancy. So if you had something in the downtown, in a like a major downtown core, and you're going to have to compete against all these other properties that have vacancy. Places that are in the suburban, outside of these major downtown core, have tended to do better on the office space. So we have a property like that we're just acquiring, and a lot of these types of properties that have been hurt a little bit by recent events. What's nice is you are able to get them at a discount over where they were before. So you can get these types of properties for less. They're on sale. I love a sale. So that's a positive. Retail too. There's certain types of retail that are doing better, than others. So retail for food. So there's certain things that people can't just go online for, right? So people are still going to restaurants. People are still having experiences. So, like the jumpy places, or, for fitness, they're going to the CrossFits or Orange Theory. They're going to medical office. They still need to go see their doctors and their dentists and their chiropractors. So all of those types of retail establishments are still in demand, but a lot of grocery store, some retail is suffering. So look at the type of real estate, and again, look at what the market is like, what the vacancy rate is like, what the potential tenant would be, in order to decide if that's a fit for you. Like I said, we've mostly been focused on industrial. There's been a huge demand for industrial. Even as things go online, Online retailers need industrial, they need warehouses, they need distribution centers, R&D. So we've had very good luck with industrial. It was one of the asset classes that did best during the pandemic. So deciding what kind of commercial you want, and then looking at location. Then the next thing is to consider, if you're doing this type of investment, is looking at your tenant, the quality of your tenant. We talked a little bit about that before, but you really want to look at the credit worthiness of the tenant. National or well-established brands tend to make better tenants because they're less likely to default, or just companies, businesses that have been around for a long time. So the more stable that company, the more likely they are to be a good tenant for the long term. The newer the company, the higher the risk. So you want to really look at the tenant. Lease terms. So you want to really look at all those various terms, and I would recommend that you have a lawyer and or a broker that is very familiar with these types of leases and these types of properties helping you. So with the lease, you're going to want to really think about things like the rent escalation clause. That's what I was saying. It's a 20-year lease, and every year the rent goes up a certain percentage, 2%, 2.5%. That's a rent escalation clause. You usually want to have that built in. Renewal options, how they, let's say it's the lease, their term, the end of their term lease, how, if they can renew, who's making sure it's clear who's responsible for any major repairs, etc. So getting all of that in the lease as clear as possible. And then your exit strategy. Like with any investment that you're doing, you really want to think about how you're going to get out of that. So you want to have a clear exit strategy in place, whether that's you plan to hold it long term, you plan to sell it after a certain period. We do, in most of ours, we have a 4 to 6 year hold plan. So we buy it, hold it for a certain amount of years, and then we'll sell it usually to an institutional buyer, a REIT, insurance company, family office. So that's our general exit strategy. Or we could hold, or we could do a cash out or refinance. So all of those are possibilities for us. But you want to think about how you plan to exit, and usually you want to consider multiple scenarios. Some of our properties that we might have sold this year, this is not the best year to be a seller. Great year to buy, not as great a year to sell. So we're holding on longer, or we're still cash flowing. That all works out fine. So those are things you'll want to think about. All right. So what are the common types of triple net lease property? So one might have a single tenant retail. So that could be like a fast food franchise, a pharmacy, a bank branch. These types of properties are often leased to well-known brands or really long-term triple net leases. Another industrial, that's what we do. So warehouses, distribution centers, logistics companies, manufacturing, light or heavy manufacturing. So those businesses that do that need those type of industrial facilities will be your tenants. Then you have office buildings. So there's smaller ones that will be leased to professional firms, with tenants handling most of the operation expenses. Now, if you have multiple tenants, they'll usually split costs for communal areas. So there is a little more property management required for that. And then medical buildings. So that's healthcare facilities like clinics or labs, where tenants manage most property related expenses. One of the types of ways that we do real estate is it's called a sale leaseback. So most of our commercial purchases are that. So what that means is that there's a tenant who owns this property, who's been using it, been basically built for them, built to suit, and they want to sell it normally so they can get the equity out of the property, but they still want to use it. So they sell it and then they lease it back. They go from being the owner to the tenant. Again, why would they do that? Because they'll get equity. Plus, there are some tax benefits to being the tenant versus the owner. They can deduct rent. If you have no loan or interest, there's nothing to deduct. So, and then all the other expenses too are deductible. So there are a variety of reasons why they'll do that. And we love those because we're able to acquire them. We don't have to touch them because the former owner, now tenant, doesn't have to move. They don't have to change a thing in terms of their operations. It's on paper, and as a now we become the owner. Usually we put them in a 15 to 20-year lease with these escalation, with the rent escalation. So that's super. We love that because we don't have to look for the tenant. We don't have to do anything. It's all already built in. So that's our favorite way of doing these types of triple net right now. So triple net sounds amazing. What are the risks and what are the downsides to it? Okay, here's the downside. So one is if your tenant defaults, right? So if we have a tenant default, we go from having this income to not only not having the income from the rent, but now you have to pay all the expenses. So that insurance and property tax that we were so thrilled we didn't have to pay, now we have to pay. So that's not ideal. And especially if it's a single tenant situation where you go from having 100% income to like negative, then now you have expenses and in addition to not having your income. That is challenging. So that's why we do so much due diligence on the tenants and really make sure that the tenants are super, super duper strong companies, so that the chance of default is very, very, very minimal. And there's, I think in the couple dozen deals that we've been a part of, knock on wood, we've never had a default. Though, it could happen. And the other way that you mitigate that risk is that you buy in a location where there is demand, where there's need. It's a great location. So if you do lose your tenant, you can put another one in its place. But just know that on these triple net lease situations, it will usually take longer to find a replacement tenant than it would to find, somebody who needs a 2-bedroom apartment in Atlanta. There probably is like a waiting list of people who would need that, but it'll take some time to do. It'll usually take, it could take months to fill up one of those triple net lease situations. The next risk is market fluctuations, right? So changes in the market can affect property values and lease terms. So a big change that we've been seeing on the office side, right, and especially since COVID, is a lot of people are working from home and not as many people are coming into the office. So one of those things that you have to think about, or with online, things have changed on the retail side. So places that for decades would have been really great are, might be suffering. And other places that you didn't think but there's opportunity. So you want to think be forward thinking and look at what will be a need. How do we get something that, or let's say, we're going to get a place that could be used for, I don't know. Well, that's partly why we like industrial. Like people, with this the warehouse and online retailer is going to use, there's probably always going to be a need for that type of property. But there's uncertainty in the world, so you do your best. And then the long-term vacancy. You want to finding new tenants can take time. So you just want to build that into your model that if you do lose your tenant, there's enough cushion to sustain you. Okay, so that is our triple net commercial discussion. Hopefully that was helpful. And I'm going to conclude with a trinity. So I brag that I am. This is totally not real estate related, but in honor of the 15th anniversary of my 35th birthday, I've decided I'm 35 forever, but I'm having 50 days of fun. And I brag that. I brag being really focused on having fun every single day. My family is getting involved. We're having fun together. And it's been amazing. So I brag my 50 days of fun. I'm grateful for I'm grateful for my triple net investments. I'm really grateful for our awesome tenants. I'm grateful for my partners in that business who are amazing. And I'm grateful grateful to have fallen into this world of triple net. And I desire more people, especially women and people of color, to get into this type of investment because I feel like it's awesome and lucrative. And I would love more underrepresented people doing that. So, if you are wanting to get involved and find out more about those types of triple net deals, and especially if if you'd be interested in doing it, in a group, we essentially crowdfund real estate is what I do, and I bring groups of investors together to purchase these types of properties. So, if you would like to get on the list to find out about these opportunities and be able to get a triple net, get a piece of a triple net deal, then I invite you to go to our investor club. I'm going to put that in the comments. It's ariagoddesses.com/investor dash club. And from there, if you go on there, fill out your information, it'll get you into a call with me. And I'd love to just like chat, find out what your goals are, and help you get access to these type of opportunities. Yeah. So that is it. That's our show today. So join me next time, and where we're getting real. So get real, stay real. See you next time. Bye.